Hello and welcome to your July 30th daily briefing. Today we have some frustrating news when it comes to reaching an agreement on enhanced unemployment and the second stimulus check. Then at the end of this video, I'm going to cover some newly released economic data that I found quite surprising and worth reporting on. All right, jumping right in here. Enhanced unemployment is set to expire tomorrow. And we really are no closer to reaching an agreement today than we were last week or the week before that. White House Chief of Staff Meadows has admitted kind of defeat, saying that unemployment benefits will expire tomorrow because it just doesn't appear that any progress is being made towards an agreement on the relief bill. We're just so far apart right now that he doesn't see there being any resolution in time before the expiration date. What that means for people who are on unemployment right now is a little bit up in the air. If that will later be backdated, if something's figured out later, we really just don't know all the specifics there. But according to him, it's not looking so great. This whole thing, though, just feels really odd to me. We have the House who voted in the HEROES Act, which contains an extension of the enhanced $600 per week unemployment through the end of the year, and then there were some provisions to extend it through March of next year. Then we have the HEALS Act, which offers an intermediate period of $200 per week before then transitioning to 70% of a worker's previous wages. These two proposals are very far apart. However, Democratic members have signaled that they aren't dead set on $600 per week anymore. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer had this to say about that situation. This is a direct quote from him. "It's not $600 or bust. Speaker Pelosi said the other day, which I thought was a great line, we don't have red lines, we have values, and we're going to negotiate with these values." So if they are open to negotiations, how are we possibly not even close to an agreement? It seems like there are likely more details to this that we just simply don't know in the general public as of right now. One potential solution many Republicans are floating around is to pass a smaller bill to help fix the most pressing issues and the issues with least amount of disagreement right now. Fix those first and then worry about the rest on a later bill. This has especially picked up steam after President Trump has voiced his support for it. And Treasury Secretary Mnuchin had this to say in regards to President Trump's position on making a smaller bill just to cover the things that we absolutely need right now. This is a quote from Mnuchin. "The president is very focused on unemployment and making sure that renters either have some type of assistance or we deal with the eviction issue. So the president has encouraged us to try and see if we can deal with that issue." The issues we would likely see passed on a smaller and more agreeable bill would be funding for schools, a second round of Paycheck Protection Program funding. With that second round, that's really the most exciting thing right now that has the most agreement on. This would allow businesses who lost up to or more than 50% of revenue due to pandemic-related circumstances and have fewer than 300 employees to apply a second time for a second round of paycheck protection funding. I think that's really exciting, and we have a bunch of funding available for it right now. There's $130 billion in remaining funding from the first round of paycheck protection funding that could go towards this, and there's kind of a general consensus there that both sides feel this is something that we should do. There hasn't been really any specifics on adding more funding to that, which I'm really curious about because of the 300 employee stipulation there. It's a little concerning that that's still a huge company, especially if that affiliation rule is still there. So like a hotel chain, as long as they have fewer than 300 employees per location, could still apply even if they have thousands of employees. So there's some areas there that we're really not sure how it's going to end up actually being passed, if there's going to be more funding, so then the little guys can actually still receive funding through this program, because if we just see that $130 billion in funding, it's going to be really hard for someone who has 3 employees or no employees, a single independent contractor, to get a second round of funding if they're fighting against all these companies with multiple hundreds of employees and lawyers and connections with banks. It's going to be tough. So hopefully there's additional funding there, but that is thankfully one of the areas that has the most agreements on right now. Beyond that, eviction protections are pretty much both sides agree that there should be more eviction protections. I don't see this one as the biggest issue right now because state and local governments and city councils and governors all can enact local ordinances where they put a rent moratorium and pause eviction proceedings even further, and most major areas have already done that. But of course, there still is that need to do it federally because I'm sure there are some areas that aren't completely covered. Then we have the worker retention tax credits, which both sides seem to agree on right now. They're not super popular, especially compared to the Paycheck Protection Program, but both sides agree on it. There's money for banks, which we don't have a whole lot of details on yet, but both sides agree on some funding for that as well, and some form of extended unemployment. Again, there's agreement that we should extend it, but how much is where there's a lot of disagreement. Mitch McConnell has noted that he has about 20 members who are open to passing a smaller bill in order to get a deal done quickly, and it seems like every hour there's even more people who are open to getting a small bill passed. A few of these people include Senator Marco Rubio, who says things just might have to be done that way. They just might have to be done in a small bill because of all these disagreements right now. There's no way they can agree on everything by tomorrow evening. And also Senator Lindsey Graham, who said he's okay with a smaller package. That's a quote from him, smaller package. The areas where we currently see little to no agreement and we wouldn't likely see on a small bill passed like tomorrow are those liability protections that McConnell states is a red line item for him. That's the 5-year protection for entities like businesses, schools, churches, things like that. There's a lot of disagreement there on at what level those protections should cover. And then we also have the state and local government aspect, which has a huge disparity on opinions right now. The HEROES Act proposed nearly $1 trillion in smaller government funding. Well, the HEALS Act proposes no additional funding, but adds some flexibility with previous funding received through the CARES Act. So huge disparity there. One thing we haven't heard much in the last few days is the second stimulus check in terms of would this be on the smaller bill if it goes through. It seems to me that this is one of the areas that has very little disagreement, and those numbers where Democrats and Republicans sit at on the issue of the second stimulus check are fairly similar in my opinion. The only difference with the Democratic proposal on the second stimulus check is it gives $1,200 for dependents instead of the HEALS Act $500, and the Democratic proposal is a little bit more inclusive and allows those who have ITIN numbers to also receive a check, while the HEALS Act, you must have a valid Social Security number in order to receive a check. So Democrats and Republicans aren't perfectly aligned, but they seem to be about as close as any other issue. So I hope that if a small package goes through, these small package jokes never get old. If a small package goes through, I hope to see a stimulus check as part of it. So we have, just in summary, we have Meadows, who believes that getting a deal passed isn't likely by Friday. And we have many Republicans who believe we can get a smaller bill passed if we have to. And then we have some Democratic members who have expressed that we shouldn't break the bill down and pass little things here and there. That's not the way to go. So on every level, we're on completely different pages right now. And really that's the most frustrating part about all this, how everyone is just so far apart, even on opinions. So let's check in with McConnell to see where he's at on this. And this is a quote from him just yesterday. He said, "Many things around here happen last minute." We know that's true. "This is only Wednesday," so he said this yesterday, "so hope springs eternal that we'll reach some kind of agreement either on a broad basis or a more narrow basis to avoid having an adverse impact on unemployment." So taking all this information into consideration, I'm going to make a few predictions. I think we'll see a smaller bill passed on the 11th hour. This way, there's going to be no major lapse in enhanced unemployment. The extension of employment is probably going to be a lower dollar amount. It's probably not going to be $600 a week. It'll probably be $300, $400 a week for a month or so. This way, they'll have additional time to work out a more agreeable plan between both sides. All right, let's move off of this for a minute let's talk about some economical data that I came across that I found really interesting. We have some newly updated GDP figures for the second quarter of 2020 in the US. First off, we had quarter one GDP, which had a loss of 5%. Now, 5% was a scary figure, but we all knew it was going to be much worse in quarter two. But how much worse was the question. Quarter two GDP showed a drop of 32.9%. This is the largest decline we have ever seen since the BEA started measuring that statistic. Compare this to the Great Recession back in 2008, where there was a quarterly drop in GDP of 8.4%. We saw a nearly 4 times more dramatic drop in GDP last quarter than we did during the Great Recession. This was pretty mind-blowing to me. I remember going through that time and feeling like everyone I knew was struggling. It felt so severe. So this came as a really big surprise to me that we're currently in a much more dramatic situation than that. The one benefit of this current downturn we're in is we've already had a significant upswing. We won't likely go back to drops of double-digit GDP losses in the next quarter and the quarter after that. According to the Commerce Department, if that 32.9% drop in GDP extended over 12 months, we would see roughly 1/3 of the value of our entire economy wiped out. And because GDP is a measure of goods and services to the final consumer, consumption makes up a large portion of the equation. In this case, because consumption in our country went down so dramatically, it actually accounted for 24% of the 32.9% drop in GDP. Again, as bleak as these numbers are, this is the worst it seems we will see these numbers. Unless, of course, virus numbers begin accelerating at amounts we have yet to see. But I like to think on the positive side and believe that the worst is behind us and we're now fighting to get back on top. And get back on top we will. So this is all I have for today's daily briefing. Check out the link in my description for Webull. It's an online stock brokerage. If you make an account today and deposit $100, you will receive 2 stocks completely free. Anyways, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.